What's up, guys? It's John Dominique, the Soul Proponent. Today, I want to talk about evidence for God. I want to talk about two aspects of this in particular. First, what is the evidence for God, if there is? Second, why do we want the evidence for God? So, first of all, we got to understand the reason why there actually is no evidence for God. The reason is because you can't get the evidence gets you. So that attitude, that mentality, that thought process of trying to get something is itself a barrier. You can't get God. You can't get evidence for God because the path is a reversal of the need to have anything, to own anything, to grab anything, to reach anything, to be attached to anything. It's a practice of non-attachment. We practice non-attachment, and then we practice non-attachment to the practice of non-attachment, if that makes sense. So you can't really get evidence for God because the evidence gets you, not the other way around. Another reason is because if we think we can get the evidence for God, then we're kind of thinking in the future. We think it's going to come on a platter. We have expectations. We have preconceived notions. We think it's something that we can get eventually in time. And we're basically chasing a dangling carrot, right? Thinking we can get it in the future, thinking it's going to happen sometime after this criteria is met, after this situation suits what I think is best, etc., etc. And that is basically unconsciously putting ourselves in the future, looking forward to something that's going to happen in the future. Well, the path to God is cultivating the now, the here and now, in this moment, without lifting a finger, everything exactly as it is. So it's a timelessness. We can't expect to experience what is timeless in time by waiting for something to happen, waiting for circumstances to be met, waiting for X, Y, Z to happen. That's not how it works. So that's another reason why we can't have the evidence for God. And we have to understand these experientially. Like, it makes sense in the mind, but unless we actually experience this in practice, it doesn't really help a whole lot. Those are a couple of reasons why we can't have the evidence. And the next thing I want to talk about is, why do we want evidence in the first place? Well, if you look at it closely, you don't really want evidence. You want what the evidence is going to give you. You want something from the evidence. You want assurance. You want concreteness. You want certainty. You want something that you can put your feet on. You want a foundation. Basically, that's what we're all looking for. That's a lot of people are looking for that when they're asking for evidence for God. And without understanding why they want the evidence, we're always going to be projecting that feeling of security on something outside of us. If you look at it deeply, if you do enough work, spiritual work on yourself, you realize that that feeling of security, that feeling of foundation is not from outside of us. It's within. That feeling comes from within inside us. So we're projecting on an unconscious level that feeling onto certain situations. When certain circumstances are met, when I get evidence, then I'll feel secure, then I'll feel happy, and those feelings, we assign them to things outside of us. But basically, the feeling comes from within us. And that's the path. The path is looking inside of us. So it takes a deep dive, multiple lifetimes possibly, hard work to look deeply into this identity of who we think we are, why we want evidence, what we think that evidence is going to do for us. If we don't look at that, then a lot of times we just continue to want to try to reach outside of ourselves, when really you can't get the evidence outside of yourself. The path is inward. All right. So evidence for God, there's a good reason why you can't actually get the evidence, because the evidence gets you. And the reason why we want evidence, we need to look at that deeply as well, because that's part of the path. That's part of the training. That's part of what we have to go through. You can't get evidence outside yourself And we need to understand the reasons why we want evidence in the first place. John Dominique, the Soul Proponent. Peace.